You're listening to Learning How to Live, the podcast about what happens after you wake up from the life you were told to want. I'm Stainfield-Bruce, and 6 years ago my best attempt at life had failed. Now I'm learning how to rebuild work, love, health, and self-worth, and I'm inviting you to learn alongside me. Let's get into it. All right, welcome back to Learning How to Live. Today I'm joined by Gursharan, who is a feminine leadership coach, and we're going to be talking about something that is incredibly important in my life today, which is the knowledge of the divine feminine, the knowledge of the divine masculine, and the remembering of this ancient wisdom. To those of you who have tuned in off the back of the title, probably because you have a familiarity or a curiosity towards it. If you're just listening by chance, then this should be very enlightening for, I feel, things that we have forgotten as human beings that are absolutely quintessentially important to how we operate in the world, how we operate romantically or with our family or within work. And so this is going to be as enlightening a conversation for me as it is, I hope, for you. But Gursharan, thank you for coming. Would you like to introduce yourself a little bit more profoundly than I?
Thank you so much, Quinn, for creating this space and having this conversation with me. So I'm Gursharan Kaur. I'm feminine leadership coach and working with high-functioning women to help them step away from chronic dissatisfaction and prevent burnout. And also working with middle-adolescence women in perimenopause, menopause sort of era of their lives to actually shed the layers that no longer serve them and actually invite sacred space and pause into their lives. So leaning into the wisdom that we will be talking about. I'm a mama of 4 little humans, and my background is 20 years in NHS leadership, commissioning and management consultancy.
Awesome. Fundamentally qualified. Sacred space. I'm just going to jump on that you said. Tell me more about sacred space.
So sacred space and sacred pause is about recognizing that we have become creatures of habit, and actually we are just, functioning on autopilot. We don't even pause or have the time or think that we can create the time to pause and invite that sacred pause to create the sacred space that we need to flourish in our lives.
What is sacred space?
Sacred space is anything that is meaningful, like this conversation right now. Very sacred space.
Well,
Anything that is intentional is sacred.
And where I'm going with this and why I jumped in it straight away is because where is it lacking in the world today? But you don't need to necessarily answer that right now. I know we're going to get to it. You had many years in traditional Western healthcare, right? The NHS being what it is, and consulting. And we're talking about something, I would say it's definitely the divine, but by definition is something that is spiritual, but also rooted in Eastern medicine and philosophy and religion and whatnot. That juxtaposition from NHS into divine femininity. Tell me about that transition.
Sure. That's a question I've been asked a great deal since I left the NHS last year. So when I was in the NHS, my intention was to serve. I joined the health sector with that clear intention and mindset. I'm here to help people. And that was started in public health. So I managed South Asian Health Services, and then I went into commissioning, again, improving care and services for people. The intention throughout the 20-year period and service was to serve. That's what I'm here for, and the space I entered. What I started to experience recently in senior leadership space was actually high functioning women not operating as themselves. They've become someone else. And the number of conversations I had on this topic with my peers, with my seniors and juniors, everyone, all of us women working in those highly performative roles, achieving a lot. We've achieved the career ladder and we've jumped to the top, etc., etc. But feeling that disconnect and having conversations about, I don't even know who I am anymore. And yes, I'm performing every day. I'm achieving a great deal. I'm achieving, above and beyond what my role asks of me, but I don't know who I am anymore. I feel lost in my personal home life and my professional life, but I continue to perform.
So much in what you've already said, and I know we're both smiling at each other knowingly. Who had they become? Who had you become?
Mm.
Like, I mean, if the question being asked was, I don't know who I am anymore. Well, who had they become, or who had they forgotten that they were?
Absolutely. And even I think it's really relevant to mention here and share. This is also applicable to women not in high functioning health sector roles or any other sector. I think every woman, and I've been coaching for some time, every woman has become now high functioning woman because the demand is such of today's society and culture and the environment we are or finding ourselves in. Everyone has become by default or have felt that they need to become high functioning to keep up with the pace of life.
This is what I've learned. This is, I think, why I certainly I was so excited to have this conversation with you now. I did an article with a woman called Carlotta Rubden talking about the dynamics of women within business, and that she had experienced most of the friction within business came from other women, not other men.
Yes.
And we got into this conversation, and what became very apparent to me in listening to her was that, from what she was saying, is that in order for women to succeed in business, which is fantastic, they had to they had to act like men. Now, it wasn't acting like a man by wearing a suit or just outward things. It was something energetic. It was something. It was, yes, women could succeed within business, but by stepping into a masculinity, by playing the game in its own way. This is what she was sharing with me. And I was like, that makes so much sense as to the dysfunction that I see in business, right? So with humanness and what we're trying to do with the restoration of soul and human qualities and balance, right? When you have when everything is weighted so heavily in the masculine, it's going to put things out of balance, and anything out of balance is eventually going to break. And so listening to Carlotta and then the conversation that we had a while ago, I was like, this is the thing, right? Because yes, women can succeed in business, but at what cost are they doing it currently? Right. And how much of that's conscious? I suspect very little, but this is why I get so excited about this. So sorry, I'll pass it back.
Not at all. And I think you've hit the nail on the head there because, and it not just in professional business world, even in personal lives, women can be each other's biggest cheerleaders and supporters, and also the cause of highest pain a woman might experience in her life.
Please go on.
So we in the business world, we have a terminology called power suit, power dressing, and the phrase itself gives it away. And you mentioned business suits. Yes, women are wearing business suits to feel that energy when stepping into those meetings, boardrooms, those conversations, etc. And there is a sense of that I can have this conversation. I'm suited and booted. I've got my high heels, power heels, right? So there is that phenomena that has been driven almost. And by default, businesswomen working in private or, public sector have sort of subscribed to it over the years, because we see that is the image of high achievers. So if I want to achieve what I want to achieve, or what my dream might be, I want to become a director, or whatever my ambition might be in life, to jump on that career ladder and keep achieving, going up the ladder. That is the image that we have subscribed to unintentionally. I wouldn't say it's intentionally. In some small cases, it might be intentionally as well. But by default, that is the image that is presented in the magazines, in the news, in the publications, in the meetings, everywhere. That is the image of a successful woman. So why would I or someone else not start behaving in that way if I want to be successful?
Go on.
And there comes a time when you realize, some of us realize, some of us still carry on and are carrying on, because we haven't taken that sacred pause. We haven't invited that sacred pause, or we haven't actually, struck that kind of burnout phase, or pre-burnout, I would call it, where our body is starting to really speak loud because we haven't been listening to the whispers.
Could you give some
And
examples of how the body might
sure.
speak?
And this is in middle age, when actually women are experiencing perimenopause and menopause. The body starts speaking louder and louder. And that's the second part of my work, right? Inviting sacred pause into your life. The body is trying to bring you into alignment, telling you very loudly, slow down. Are we listening to it? No, we're trying to keep up with the pace. And then we subscribe to the medications, the pills, any dis-ease in the body, disease. And there's so much in the terminology and the words that we can decipher from what the actual meaning of something is, right? So disease is a dis-ease in our body. The body is trying to communicate, hey, I don't feel good here. Or, symptoms start emerging. And instead of kind of inviting that sacred pause to lean into that wisdom our body is sharing with us, we start medicating ourselves to mask the symptoms.
Could I
And
ask,
yes,
Gursharan, so if to any women listening, what if you were to be specific about the symptoms?
sure. So autoimmune disorders are highly prevalent in women, and so are gut issues.
My
So we haven't.
fiance had, has pretty significant fibroid issues that which
Hmm,
she felt was definitely aligned to elements of stress and things like that.
yeah. Because we are constantly living in stress, we're not feeling stress anymore, because feeling is an emotion, energy in motion, right? Emotion. I will decipher a lot of words in this way in our conversation throughout. So energy in motion is emotion. If stress was a feeling or emotion, it would come and go because it's energy in motion. What we have leaned into and sort of fell into is the culture of chronically, constantly living with stress. Stress is like our family member now, right? Everyone has it, everyone feels it all the time. So our nervous system is constantly trying to communicate with us. Back pain, gut issues, neck issues, MSK, musculoskeletal type issues, a lot of these issues, and women's, kind of health problems as well. A lot of them, thyroid again is another one of them, are rooted in not listening to our body and what we are kind of, holding on to. The emotions we hold on to become stagnant, and over time, they present with the dis-ease in our body because we are not paying attention.
And this might be a wild oversimplification, but this is the byproduct of not tuning into the divine feminine, right? This is by turning up into the world heavily anchored in the divine masculine, and not listening to our bodies. And, I think we could, I'm going to stop short of sort of degendering it, because I think there is an element of both energies within us, and maybe we can talk about that later. But in this instance, by being a woman, stepping into strictly the divine masculine within the working day, etc., and the byproduct being disease and disease, that's an impact. I suspect there's also an impact just practically in life outside of even the individual body. But almost before we dive down that rabbit hole, I would love to maybe just start, for those who are maybe not as initiated in the language, to just explore, well, what is the divine feminine? What is the
Hmm.
divine masculine? Could we start there?
Sure, sure. So we all have both energies. It's like sun and moon, yin and yang, go hand in hand. All of us have both energies, and they're sacred energies to help us blossom and step into our higher conscious. If we lead with women, for example, divine feminine is leading with intuitive wisdom. So we've been blessed with that. And if we look historically, that's what women used to do. They would have the intuitive wisdom to know, lead with their gut instincts and know what they need to do to protect the families, look after families, run the families. And even in times of wars, for example, over the centuries, women have held fort, so to speak, protecting children, looking after children and their families when men may not be around. And the divine masculine energy, again, is sacred energy, which leans into protection, right? It looks after, it leans into providing, and it's emotional balance for both energies, divine masculine and divine feminine. When you're rooted in who you are and what you're here to do, we don't need to try and become someone else. And this again goes into the family context. You mentioned romantic relationships as well. We don't need to compete with anyone else to be someone else. And what are we teaching our children, though? What are you going to be when you're older?
I'm going to ask you to go back to the roots of it all. I could listen to it for hours, and it's my podcast, so I choose to listen to it for hours if I so want to. Please tell more about just the roots of this stuff.
Mm,
Like, go as far back and go as far out there as you like, because I
mm,
love it.
sure. So feminism, feministic kind of, agenda, so to speak, also has a greatest role to play here. What has happened is, with women's rights and advocacy for women's rights, and I've always been a feminist, my family would know, my friends would know, my circles would know, I'm all for rights for everyone, equal rights for everyone. And so that again goes for, women's rights as well. Unfortunately, what's happened over the years and decades is that has led to be the root cause, in a way, you can say, of where we are now, where the world is today. Women no longer know who they are because they are in the masculine energy so much. Because in every family, both men and women are now out to work. Both parents, partners, whatever the relationship might be in a family unit, everyone is trying to work to keep afloat. So there is no longer that kind of, baseline of, I don't have to go to work. Where it was we went to work by choice because we wanted to exercise our right to vote, to work, to be in spaces where traditionally only men were back in the years, right? Back in the decades. But now what's happened is we are in competition all the time. And we're talking about, gender pay gaps and equality rights, and still women are fighting for their rights where they haven't received equal rights. And that's rightly so. The byproduct of all this work and campaigns is losing the essence of who we are. So we've disconnected so much from our gut intuitive wisdom and who we are. So divine feminine by nature attracts, not chase, right? So we've forgotten that. We're chasing constantly. We're chasing success. We're chasing, those kind of successful habits. We're chasing to be someone who we are not, or not meant to be even. But we are chasing to be someone else because, going back to our childhood, that's what we have been taught as well. Men and women, girls and boys, and everyone has been taught, be someone, be successful. And the definition of success then defines how we start acting and behaving, and the values and the behaviors we lean into to become that picture of success and the image that is not divine masculine or divine feminine.
Yeah, I love this so much. If we were to go right back to this dawn of our species, could you paint masculine and feminine to me?
Sure. So masculine, like I said, is the protective energy. The masculine has the traits of extrospective, right? And emotional maturity to know what the man needs to do to protect the family. Yeah. The men would go out hunting if we go really back. And maybe in some cultures, women did as well. But by default, men would go out hunting. Men would guard the space that the family was staying in. Men, by default, had the protective role. And it was that kind of strength and inner knowledge that, yes, I can do this. And actually, kind of do that with honor, respect that. So it wasn't that, I'm trying to be someone else or I'm in competition with someone else. By default, men in those days knew that they were going to be the protectors. The picture that has been painted, sorry, just taking a step back. So then that led to purposeful action, decisiveness. I need to go find food for my family. And that's what men would traditionally do back in the days, if we go really back, right, historically. And women then had the homely kind of roles. So I grew up in India and my grandma never went to work, both of them. My granddads, we had, a lot of land, agriculture, etc. And we had a lot of, animals, etc., cows, buffaloes, etc., etc. So men had the kind of those duties off, going to get food, looking after the kind of like, farmland and doing all the things agriculture. Women, ladies of the house, had the roles of kind of, cooking and kind of keeping the house tidy, clean, etc., etc. But also that kind of like, intuitive wisdom that was parted then with children. So there were defined roles, we can say, at the time. There was no competition. When we have started, then if we start looking at the kind of equality kind of conversations and campaigns when started, and women, yes, didn't have the right to vote, didn't have the right to do certain things in society, that's where feminism campaigns started, trying to get us equal rights. But what has happened, we have actually suffered.
And I want to come back into this in a second, but if we go, and thank you, if we take it just back to the dawn of humanness and the protector, and then what would you refer to as the feminine energy, that home, that nurturing energy? Like, how do those two things then translate today? For example, if you were to take protector and like how is that? Because of course nobody in their right mind is saying that any human being, male or female, should not have equal rights, or that shouldn't be able to do whatever they want to do, whatever job it is, whatever function it is. There's no, if anyone wants to do what they want to do what they want to do. Madness to suggest otherwise. However, the concept has got so warped, and where I believe this has got warped is with the patriarchy, right, and the Industrial Revolution and years of Judeo-Christian and Abrahamic faiths, as well as most other religious organizations, but fundamentally the patriarchy of probably the last 6,000 years, right? This is where it's got warped, right? This identity of man versus woman, because what I believe in is the restoration of the energetic sources of divine feminine and divine masculine. So what I'm interested in doing is uncovering those original energy sources, that like decisive energy, that nurturing energy, that intuitive energy of the feminine, right? And like we said, we both men and women have these, right? It's but what's happened is that we've just pushed everything, male or female, into the masculine energy, right? We have forgotten the feminine energy. It's for me, the big word that I love at the moment is remembering, not even restoring, right? But remembering, right? Where are we at as a species? It is time to remember. Remember what the truth is underneath everything, right? And in doing so, rebalance, recreate the harmony in the world, in our lives, in our relationships, at work, all of these things. I mean, the whole point of humanness, my consultancy, is to restore that human balance at work, So I'll go back to my question. Right, because yes, and we'll talk about how we got to this situation. But if we take those pure energy forms, how should or what is the healthy way they should manifest themselves today? Is that an okay question, Gershwin?
Absolutely. So the healthy way is, again, to inviting, first of all, from where we are at, all of us need to invite sacred pause and start living intentionally. Lean into what our true values are. When we know what our values are, we don't have conflict in life because we know what we are in tune with and what feels right to our core, right? And I left the NHS, for example, when my values were no longer aligned with the performative and highly competitive toxic masculinity at play. So answering your question in this way, so leaning into my values are at a clash here. This is not who I am. And that happened because I did invite that sacred pause into my life. I actually took time off sick because I was not feeling well. And this is what happens. Our body is trying to speak to us, whispering all the time, hey, something's not right. Hey, what about this? Hey, not feeling great here. But are we tuning into that whisper that we keep hearing or ignoring it and masking it? So leaning into that kind of, innate divine feminine for women, for example, is about leaning from our gut wisdom, intuitive wisdom, and stopping to kind of, just making decisions from our brain. Because it's always a debate about brain versus heart, right? Who's leading you? For women, it's intuitive wisdom from our gut. And that's why we are feeling and seeing so many women dealing with experiencing gut disorders and allergies and kind of, sort of intolerances, because our body is just so much out of tune. And we need to just invite pause and lean into, if I was nurturing person, who we are by default, right? If I was to lean back into that, how will I respond to this, for example? And really kind of, delving into that intentional living. So we are here to step into our higher conscious, men and women, children, everyone. We are here, a soul having a human experience. Our families and relationships are in our lives to remind us of any unfinished business, anything that we haven't worked on or need to work on to step into our higher conscious for both divine masculine and divine feminine. So when we keep experiencing similar patterns, for example, in life, in our relationships with our children, that's reminding us, serving as a reminder of things that we need to take care of. If things are triggering us, for example, what is my inner child feeling at the moment? Because what is also linked to all of this conversation is the inner child wounds.
Could you give an example or an example anecdote, perhaps?
Sure. So when people have wounded inner child, anyone, divine masculine, divine feminine energies, will be very innate and just know and experience fully who they are, right? There is no imbalance. We are operating from high vibrational energy of joy, love, pureness. There is no apathy, guilt, fear, anger, all of those low vibrational energies. What's also happening in the world right now, what we see is majority of the population globally, and again, where toxic masculinity comes in, a lot of the percentage of the population is leaning and leading from inner child wounds. A wounded inner child comes out to play because we are not acting as our innate divine masculine, divine feminine spaces. We're reacting from that wounded inner child space. So when we don't know how to act because we are forever in stress, our nervous system is just so much out of balance. It's just living from that constantly imbalanced state. Our vagus nerve is constantly in imbalance. So we are always reacting. And this is what we're seeing in workplaces, people reacting. Something little happens, men and women reacting. Something happens in outside space, in the world, global platforms. And the global leadership is also evidencing this at the moment, right? Wounded people, wounded inner child coming out to react. People are reacting at everything. So and toxic masculinity is about the kind of distorted version and vision of what masculinity is. So when women are claiming those spaces that, hey, we have equal rights, right? Men are then, again, reacting from wounded spaces. And that's then stepping into their toxic masculinity, forgetting what their
You're
role
so
is.
right. No, but
And
you're
then
so right.
yeah.
Let's get into this, Gursharan, because this is of the moment, right? We got the toxic masculinity situation going on, and like anyone maybe listening to this, because it's so powerful. Anyone listening to this it's so easy to get confused in the narrative that of between equal rights, equality, and that innate inner truth of divine masculine and divine femininity. I believe the antidote to toxic masculinity is, of course, divine masculinity. You talked a lot about the inner child and the wounding. When we are in fear, we act dysfunctionally. Right? When we are in fear, we either act on anger, or we act in lust, or we act in pride, or we act in arrogance, whatever it is. They're all defense mechanisms to fear, to self-centered fear. And, what's been happening, I think, when you look on the grand scale of the equal rights debate or femininity or I guess when you have these, what am I trying to say? I'm trying to be so political here, and maybe I should just stop and just speak from the heart. But when you have so much, so many young men today feeling disempowered and not knowing where to go with that, right? The disempowerment is nobody's fault, right? Just because there was a rise in equal rights for women doesn't mean anything should have been taken away from men, right? But again, because this was done from a place of disharmony and not from a place of love and truth, it was done from a very masculine place, right? Equal rights for women was from a place of masculine equality, masculine energy. It wasn't actually from that restoration of the femininity. it felt like, I guess, something was being taken. So in order for someone to have, someone must not have. And so then you have these disempowered men who then don't know where to turn, and young men and boys even. And what rises in its place, like in all times of crisis, is people turn to extremes. Right? And so
Absolutely.
the only thing that
And
fills the
violence.
gap, yeah. And I remember a history teacher saying, to me when introducing Nazis and communists, he said, in times of a crisis, people turn to the extremes. They look to the extremes for a solution, and that's because the alternative, the restoration of soul for these young men, isn't there. Although you start seeing pockets of it now, people turning to religion, and again, whether that's right or wrong, people looking for something at least more spiritually healthy is a positive sign. But this is why we're having this conversation, is because the answer, I do believe, is to remember what it means to
Mhm.
be divinely masculine and divinely feminine, and again, I'm sorry if I'm rambling here, but the idea that that intuitive side of ourselves can be allowed to
Mm.
exist without fear. Because how can intuition, and this goes back to the protector play, but how can intuition and creativity feel safe to emerge if the system is saying we're under threat? Right? Because you're not going to suggest something new for fear of reprisal. You're not going to say, but how, do you know what? Let's take a step back and let's be vulnerable,
Mm.
when you're scared that you're going to get hurt, and this is where for me, the role of the masculine today is to step into that protector, but that's not a
Mm.
protector from force. That's the way I've envisaged it, Gursharan, is this: the men would stand around the campfire with the backs facing the fire, and around the fire would be the women who were allowed to open and express and to pray and to call in the divine. And it's like that's for me the metaphor of the energies, right?
Mm.
It's not a protection looking in with a control. It's a facing outwards that allows for the intuition to
To
emerge,
flow.
you know,
Mm. That's
and
really
and
powerful.
like for,
I was visually there as you were describing it. That's essentially, if we were to create an image of what it might look like, that's it. You've nailed it. And we need to take a step back. And then you've mentioned young men, young boys, sort of, not knowing who they are and where do they look, who's their role models, right? And then the role models are leaders living with and leading with toxic masculinity. So if we take a step back, it starts in childhood, right? So I've mentioned inner child wounds. Goes parallel with that is the kind of how we are raising our children now. So if we want to take that and remember and almost kind of like start leaning back into those innate sort of, what is ours, who we are here to be. And if we start honoring that in our families, in relationships with our children, honoring just who we are, we're souls having human experience, right? Not trying to make someone something else. We spend so many, years in our children's, younger years trying to make them something, trying to make something of them, or just teaching them constantly, be this, be that, have a role model, be like that role model. Whereas your child may not be here to be that person or live like that person who we are kind of pushing down on them, as their role models. We're all here for our own purpose and, to serve our soul. So actually, we need to detach self-worthiness and self-acceptance from productivity.
yeah, now you're talking my language. Well, I mean, you have been the whole time. How do we remember?
How do we remember? If we just give ourselves permission to be.
But this is where we have I agree, of course, but this is where we have the problem, is that we are, like you said, we are in fear as a species. We are in fear. We are not giving ourselves that space
Mm.
to allow the system to let go of control in order for these things to emerge. And this is why we are talking, and this is, I think, what's happening in the world, is that there is a consciousness and awakening happening, and with it comes the opportunity to create the spaces for these things to happen. Sorry, I was just a thought that.
No, absolutely. So it goes back to, I think, I strongly believe, and I've experienced and witnessed this in others' lives as well, that when we are operating from lower vibrational frequencies, we are subdued. We are opening ourselves and giving our power, innate power that we've been blessed with and sent with on this planet, on this human experience with, we're giving it away. When I'm in fear, if I'm in fear, I'm telling myself, I don't know what I should do. So I'm going to look outwardly for guidance, for information. Whereas the source is within us all. So if I work on, we can all do this work. So the answer is, how do we remember? All of us can work on ourselves only. That's where it begins. And that's what we are here for, to do the work on ourselves, to elevate our human experience and our soul's journey. If we constantly work on ourselves, focus on what am I feeling, living in tune with what we are feeling, right? What's the energy in motion right now? And keep elevating and responding to whatever's happening in our lives, life events, from a place of truth, from a place of higher conscious, not because I'm operating from anger, fear, apathy, guilt, any of the low vibrational energies, only from a place of joy and love. And that then raises the collective divine masculine, divine feminine.
When I look back at my story, and I've had all sorts of things, whether it be my, abandonment as a child, or my addiction, or my, or even the suffering of when my daughter was very ill, and she's fine now, but she had a liver transplant very young, and there was all these things that I've been through. And even things that aren't even that extreme, but lots of things that one might label as suffering. But I look back at all of it today, knowing it's exactly what I needed to become the man that I am today. In Kabbalah, for example, the idea is that it's all for the good, right? It's all
It's
for
here
the
to
good.
serve us.
Exactly. That and so I'm I subscribe profoundly to spirituality. Now, but there is a very pragmatic aspect to this, which is simply that look back at one's life. Look at everything that happened, good and bad, if you want to label it that way, and say that, and really look at it objectively and see how everything has sort of weaved into a tapestry that has led one to be aware. And that's
Think
what's
to the
so
next. Yeah.
exciting. When I look forward at the next however many years of my life, and I can say, I am comfortable in not knowing the answer. All my suffering came from needing to control an outcome, thinking that that's what was going to make me happy. But actually being able to let go, is like that. I mean, that's peace, right? And sometimes I have to let go
Absolutely.
100 times in a day, right? But it's like, but in finding that peace, and then being able to allow the intuition, my feminine, my divine feminine, right? But then do you know what? I am going to segue this now, and because I think about my romantic relationship and how important it is to have balance in the relationship, that I can create the space where my partner feels safe, where she feels safe to and again, it's not about physical safety. I mean, that sort of goes without saying for me. but so her nervous system is safe. What do I have to
Emotional
do
safety.
to
Mm.
create that her vagus nerve is relaxed? Because in doing so, it allows her to step into her nurturing intuitiveness, right? And she works and, makes more money than me most of the time. But it's like, but we have these roles, right? Like it's like I know that when I step into the divine masculine, and for example, I like if I she doesn't like choosing restaurants. She doesn't like choosing like she wants me to tell her where we're going and when we're going, right? Like she knows I'm doing it for her. It's not because I necessarily want to go to that place, but she wants me to choose it, arrange it, and do it so that she can just be. She
Mm.
makes a joke when we travel in the airport. It's like, I have the passports, the luggage, I'm looking at the times and she just gets to, walk through the airport. Now, as much of a cliche as that might be, for her, that's her feeling comfortable to just let go.
Just being. Mm.
Yeah, and that
Mm.
allows for so much more to emerge in the relationship,
Mm.
So I can see, like I didn't know this before. Prior to maybe my journey of recovery 7 years ago, my idea of the divine masculine, I had no idea of the divine masculine, but my idea of masculinity was probably toxic. It was that I need to provide financially, but therefore I am in control and therefore I need to be treated in a certain way. It was all very transactional, right? Very dysfunctional and unsustainable, right?
Mm.
Sorry.
No, and when the relationships are operating from a place of performance, because that's what you've just described, isn't it? Um, I make more money, therefore I, by default have the control or should have the control. I command where we spend the money or how we do things, etc., etc. And money has a lot of role to play in all of this conversation in relation to divine masculine, inner child, productivity, self-worth, i.e., lack of self-worth, because everything is linked to a performance. It's like the world is a stage and we're all here actors performing. My scriptures actually refer to it in that way. So we're here for a limited time with an end date that we don't know of. So imagine if, and I say if, but it is actuality, I don't know if I'm going to have the next breath or not, right? That's a fact of life. We just don't know when our last breath might be. So if I don't know if I'm going to be here tomorrow, next year, in 5 years' time, etc., etc., how can I claim to own something or plan something, etc., right? And then that brings us back to mindfulness, living in the present moment, and going back to the point around how do we remember? Back in the days, people didn't know if they were going to be attacked, a wild animal might come and kind of kill them, etc., right? They were living in the presence. They were very much living in the presence. We have this food for now. Tomorrow we will go find or hunt or whatever, right? Living in the presence. What we're doing now is, and the culture and society has adopted to, we're here forever. Everyone thinks they're here forever. And yes, we plan, and yes, we, kind of do things and plan things. And sometimes we have to, because that's again the kind of system we are part of or have become part of and subdued with. But actually, if we surrender, like you said, sometimes we have to surrender many times in a day. When we start surrendering and actually accepting, we start living in flow. There is no need for control then in flow. And this is all then, kind of rising collectively because we are operating from high vibrational energy. I choose to respond to things, not react. I choose to take every action because of love, because it brings me joy. And if we adopt that mentality, thinking, way of living and way of being, we're not performing. Everyone's able to just be who they are here to be, right? And any experiences we have in life, all experiences are here to serve us, remind us if something's triggering us. That's a reminder. You've got work to do on yourself. Someone said something, someone did something. Why is it bothering you so much, right? And that's a reminder. So everything in life, all experiences are here to serve us. So if everything is here to serve me, do I need to react? React. But I will react if my inner child doesn't know what safety means. And if we go back to our childhoods, I'm in my 40s now, mid 40s. If you kind of think back to my childhood, we didn't have a lot of money. My, dad was working, mom was homemaker, etc. But but if I think back to the messaging we receive in our childhood, again, it was very much about who you're going to be something, be someone, right? And the worthiness then starts shoving us, pushing us in the direction of, I'm not whole. I can't accept myself. So self-acceptance then becomes problematic because I can't accept myself as I am. So I'm, of course, going to look outwardly. Outwardly is a stage of toxic masculinity at play. So I start becoming like that. Can you see how all of this is interlinked? So what can we do to remember, going back to that? Every one of us working on ourselves, not trying to change anyone else, but actually raising our consciousness and vibrational energy. When we look at the map of consciousness, there's a lot of work that has been done on this, and there's a great image that I always share with everyone. Identify where we are on that. And maybe we can share that as part of this. I'm not sure how the tech works, but if we identify what's our sort of, baseline on that map of consciousness, a lot of people are living in fear. Fear of not having enough money to survive, fear of the cost of living, fear of physical safety, depending on where you are across the world right now. Fear of something, fear of staying afloat. There is a lot of job cuts in the NHS and all the other sectors, fear of not having a job, not being able to provide, right? When you're constantly living in fear, how can we expect that nervous system to be regulated, right? There's a constant fight or flight mode. You can never rest. We are always in stress. All of this is interlinked in such a dense way. And that's why we need to invite the sacred pause, to actually pause and think, where am I going with all this? Where am I headed? And actually, is this how I want to live? No, none of us are living, right? Well, I would say some are, but a lot of people are not living, they're surviving because they are in survival mode because of the fear of XYZ. There could be a long list of things, right? So we have to raise our vibrational energy, come out of fear. And when we then lean into our innate divine masculine, divine feminine, we attract what is meant for us, what is written for us. There is abundance in the universe. We don't need to chase. We need to step out of the game and actually start attracting what is written for us. But for that, we have to raise our consciousness and vibrational energy, frequency of love, which is very high, and fear is very low, and guilt is very low. Anger
I,
is very low.
if we're talking about the same map of consciousness, I subscribe to David R. Hawkins' map of consciousness. I don't know if that's the one you're referring to, but but yes, I'm very much in line with you on that. That word performance that just came up again, again, when dealing with the masculine, it's such a thing, even if you don't mind me going there, when it comes to sexual performance, as soon as you're in a frame of performance, you are, like you said, out of the present moment.
Yeah.
And this is the thing, like in any aspect of life, if we are not in the present moment, then we are projecting to some point in the future, or like you say, we're in the past. And, Eckhart Tolle talks obviously extensively about presence and the present moment. And that's where I got that. If we're either projecting to some point in the future or in the past, neither of which is real, right? Which means when you say to your point about not living, right? If we're not in the present moment, then we're not here. And what I
Mm,
see happen time and time again, and certainly I was a victim of this, is living the same year over and over again, 80 times, 90 times, however long you live. And it's just the same year with slightly different flavors at different
that's
points,
it.
like,
That's
which
it.
to me is today the concept of is a hell. The idea that I'm just trapped in this loop, but in the present moment all is perfect, unless I'm physically being attacked by something. Like,
Yeah.
in the present moment all is well, and being
So
able to connect with that and to tap into it is massive. And this, like you say, I sort of go back to this thing of performance again at work, performance and growth, and all of this, it needs rebalanced so profoundly.
mm,
And I am unequivocally in the belief that this is about the restoration, or the remembering of the divine feminine, right? The that feminine energy, right? And actually, if we want to be neuroscientific about it, just for those perhaps craving that, it's right brain thinking. It's the right
mm,
hemisphere of the brain, right? It is the
absolutely.
female energy. Which is not about sex. It's about it's the and not David R. Hawkins, Ian McGilchrist, Dr. Ian McGilchrist, who is, I think, the eminent writer on the right hemisphere of the brain, wrote a huge book called the Master and His Emissary. You know, like, without allowing that part of our brains, that part of that intuition, that creativity to flow, we are robbing her. We are surviving.
Mm.
It is just about like reaction and survival. Like you say, reaction. Like that's what the left brain is. It's like, bang, that happened. Right, react. It's not space to be
And
intuitive.
I think this is where the kind of, inner work is really critical in all of this conversation and this movement that is emerging and has emerged over the last few years. So when we are in the performance mode, I think it's worth sharing this and bringing this to the conversation as well. We are all projecting, I'm perfect, right? I'm perfect. I know what I'm doing. I'm an expert in this area, etc., etc. So I am like untouchable, perfect. And again, leans into toxic masculinity with that mindset as well. But if we take a segue from that, all of us have shadows. All of us have shadow work to do on ourselves if we haven't done it already, right? And that's then accepting when we do that work, when we do that kind of, inner reflection, pondering, and kind of digging off who I am really, what we start and begin to accept is we're all imperfect. That's why we're on this planet. That's why our soul's here to learn and unlearn and relearn, right? So actually, if I do the shadow work, I begin to, embody the whole of me. I'm not looking for someone else to complete me, leaning on relationships, right? And that's where the intensity of conflict is. We expect the other person to complete us. We're all whole as we are. So if
Yeah.
we're not expecting someone to complete us, the expectations change, right?
And this
I'm
is
not
for me the
expecting my,
definition of emotional security, right? Is
yes.
not needing.
So we
I've got
are
a quote.
operating from a place of completeness.
Which is the goal of all therapeutic work, right? It's
Yes.
again, we're again not even referencing spirituality here. The goal of all therapeutic work is that integration. I talk
Mm.
about it as learning to parent ourselves, no longer
Reparenting.
needing that, that where I can give myself the love and the worthiness that I crave from my mother and my father.
Mm.
I have a
Mm.
question, just to as we close out here, Gershon. Can women be toxically masculine?
Absolutely.
Go on.
Absolutely. And this is when we are performing in the power game. This is when we are claiming in a wrong way. This is when we are trying to outperform our peers and men who are also, operating from a place of toxic masculinity because we're in competition. This is where we are trying to show the world I'm powerful. There is so much of this, and what I mentioned at the very beginning, there is so much of this at play right now because when you look at a female leader, you can see the difference if there is performative toxic masculinity in action or divine femininity. Because the toxic masculinity in women leads to lack of compassion. And what you mentioned about a woman can be another woman's, greatest competitor or source of, sadness or grief. Grief can be in many different ways, and that's where that emerges from. Because I have reached this stage on my career ladder, I can now treat other women in a different way. I almost forget what I had to do, the loops I had to kind of overcome and go through. But then I now have control because I'm in a very executive senior role, right? And in home lives, what happens really quickly referencing that, when a child gets married, daughter-in-law, son-in-law, etc., relationships start in families, especially in my culture. What starts to happen is daughter-in-law, mother-in-law conflict starts emerging. And that is, again, the mother-in-law, the newly formed mother-in-law will start reacting what treatment she received when she came into the family. Instead of nurturing and showing compassion towards the new woman in the house, right? And what's happening there is the woman went through menopause around that time. Traditionally, they didn't know what it was. There was no name for it. It was just kind of, oh, your period stopped and that's it. But actually, with perimenopause, we are now understanding the kind of, significance and the role it plays in a woman's life. And brain fog and kind of like, your physical symptoms, emotional symptoms, etc., have such a big kind of, kind of impact in your life at that time. And imagine a younger woman's coming into your home, into the family, who has none of these, you know, active, energetic, compassionate, loving, etc., etc. She's got her whole life ahead of her.
Taking the
You
sun
start
away.
projecting all of that onto her. Toxic masculinity, again,
I,
in
I
that space.
but I think that that's such a great place to close on, because it also just it desensitizes the whole thing. We're not talking about men or women really. We're
Mm,
talking about this profound um human uh, uh, energy that we have to be aware of, right? Which is that we are made up of this divine masculine, this divine feminine, and that what we are striving for is balance and harmony, and
mm,
therefore an antidote to the disease that we are seeing in the world. I believe the antidote to work is a restoration of soul, a restoration of balance, right? The divine feminine must be allowed to emerge within the workplace. Like, it must be,
mm,
in order to stabilize.
absolutely.
And what you've been talking about, certainly what you're an expert in when it comes to women and their health and the restoration of that balance. It's all, for me, about the restoration of the harmony, of the balance, the remembering of who we are. So, I just want to say, Gershwin, thank you so much. is there anything you'd like to add? And we will, of course, put links to your contact details and your LinkedIn and whatnot in the bio. But is there anything you want to say about where people can find you or how they should, or is there anything else you want to add?
I think just on a final note, the remembering enables us to actually remember that we're all energetic beings. And as you mentioned rightly, this is not about right or wrong. This is about restoring and remembering what balance looks like, what balance is missing, and we have the power to create that balance. So it's almost about reclaiming. The remembering is enabling us to reclaiming our innate powers that we've been bestowed with. It's been great to have this conversation. I've thoroughly enjoyed it. Thank you so much, Gwen, for the opportunity and creating this sacred space.
Well, hopefully it's the first of many, Gursharan. And look, let's keep raising the consciousness.
Absolutely. Let's all keep playing our part in it.
Lots of love.
Likewise, have a blessed day.
Thanks for listening to Learning How to Live. If this sparks something for you, share it, subscribe, and remember, you don't have to escape your life. You can build one worth staying for.